the current state of MMA journalism is so sad, not even depressing because that would mean that it would have to show some sort of emotion. It's melancholy. It's nothingness. You could really say this about almost all other sports and their media and journalism as well, but MMA's product is just so much better. There are more compelling stories, more interpersonal narratives that could steer the media in a meaningful direction. You can break MMA fans into 4 main camps. People will often use one of these qualities as their why in regard to mixed martial arts: technique, violence, collective pride, and narrative. As someone whose love of MMA is mainly built off of its storytelling capabilities, I feel left out. I feel like it is an afterthought. It's brought up to be just a quirky little fact or detail, but it's never really focused on to the level where I think it should be. You know, in the lead up to Usman-Edwards 2, the media said that because the first fight was so long ago, it wouldn't and shouldn't matter. Okay, fair, they were both very different fighters, but then that just means that you have to take a slightly different approach, something a little bit more unconventional. Look at the changes that they've made between both fights. Roll with that. Edwards improving his BJJ, becoming an even sharper striker, and having these long stretches of inactivity. Whereas Usman stuck with his physical, heavy wrestling approach while upgrading his weak spots, the striking, with Trevor Whitman, and staying extremely active. Contrast builds intrigue, ladies and gentlemen. Conor versus Khabib. You don't find any more contrast than that. You know, you put two people with opposing stories and worldviews together, and it was magical. Because even looking at what they have in common, oh, they're both cage fighters. Yeah, but McGregor's family was super reluctant about letting him go to boxing gyms and start fighting. Khabib was born, bred, and raised to be a fighter. Fighting is linked to both the Irish and Dagestani cultures, but again, we come back to the differences of it all. So, comparing and contrasting, while being used very infrequently, is the most effective form of storytelling and narrative building that we have in MMA and maybe even all media. But people refuse to use it. It's simply easier to just report facts, which is necessary for sure. But when media members take things into their own hands and try to craft their own narrative and build them before your eyes, they will often fall flat. They feel disingenuous because they are. I don't hate Ariel Helwani. I think his influence on the sport is probably a net positive, and he's very good at his job, but he is always instigating, you know? There's a clip of him talking with Stipe, and Stipe really is talking about burying the hatchet with DC and wishing him all the best, and Ariel just keeps bringing up the eye pokes and the lack of respect and the denying the trilogy and all this shit. And Stipe just says, in that classic Stipe Miocic tone, it's all over, I wish him the best. It's always the same way too. Ariel says, hey man, I don't want to put you on the spot or anything, but... And then he proceeds to put them on the spot in what is always the worst way possible. Dustin Poirier was on the MMA Hour, and Ariel, with a minute's notice, patched in Eddie Alvarez into the Skype call. I like entertaining build-ups in media as well, I like confrontation, but tactics like this are just plain underhanded. Ariel Helwani has since moved on from MMA Fighting, the company where I would say he did his best work. MMA Fighting as a company is less than stellar. Nope, I'm not even going to give him that. MMA Fighting has got to be one of the worst sports media organizations on the planet, and I'm going to tell you exactly why. Don't worry, I brought receipts. Their parent company has a history of being just kind of shitty people with such anti-journalism as news articles are scary, but you still need to read them. Feel-good stories are masks for societal failure, and everything ends even bluey. Phenomenal stuff, so why would we have a higher standard for our shitty little offshoot sports media division? Huh? We have a pretty crazy cast of characters here as well. Damon Martin is the weird sex pest of the group. In a now deleted video because they were getting flamed, everybody was talking shit for a day there before they got rid of it. Now you can't flame them anymore. That's the ultimate checkmate. Oh, you're talking shit? I'll just get rid of it. People forgot, man. People forget, man. But I remember Lucas Tracy made a video about it too. Pretty crazy stuff. He was asking Paige Van Zandt to do an OnlyFans collab with the other girl she was fighting, and I quote, have some sort of bet where they get the other's name tattooed on their ass? That's weird. That's super weird. As a bet or something, you know, that's strange. And he kept asking her questions about her OnlyFans, like she was fighting in a week, and that was all he would pretty much talk about. Paige Van Zandt is an absolute journeywoman. Couldn't make it in the big leagues and now had to resort to OnlyFans and doing freak show bullshit, power slap, GFL, etc. And the whole interview, Damon was just swallowing the microphone and not asking her about fighting. Crazy stuff. He's been a journalist, an editor, a producer, and a lot more at MMA Fighting. He's worn a lot of hats. But the first thing I noticed, right, physiognomy, look at this guy, receding hairline. spacers, tattoos. Kind of looks like a dork, I gotta be honest. Coming from a dork, I can sniff him out a mile away. He is one, okay? So let's meet the rest of the team, shall we? Let's see some of the coworkers, some of the other guys huddled around the water cooler. Mike Heck gets some of the biggest scoops in MMA. He might be the best part of the company. No complaints about him, really. Jed Meshew is just annoying, always being a contrarian. Very fast and loose with the 10-8 rounds as well. If you need to know anything about Jed, it's that he's a stickler for the rules, man. Any round that is vaguely dominant, you can expect a wacky-ass scorecard from Mr. Meshew. Alexander K. Lee is the guy who tried to put out a hit piece on Strickland, digging up old tweets. Kind of a moron as well, but really nothing in the way of personality, especially when Strickland just owned it. You know, he said, yeah, I called him a slur, what about it? You know? It's very hard to outmaneuver that. Thank God that the majority of MMA media is independent. As much as we give them shit, you know, the MMA guru Lucas Tracy, at least they're sometimes funny. Even the biggest MMA guru hater can say, oh, well, he said a couple of funny things like once or twice. You know, maybe the majority of the time you don't agree with him, but he's had some funny bits here and there. Same with Lucas. The MMA fighting boys are just dead serious all the time. How did we let this happen? Because Vox is a very openly left-leaning company, boring media group that cornered the market on MMA somehow. Why is MMA fighting like kind of the number one? Like Junkie's there and ESPN's there, but I would say right now MMA fighting puts out the most stuff and have the most journalists. And it's funded by Vox money, which is crazy, you know, in a sport that's like 80% right-wing, boys being boys type stuff, very exuberant personalities, and I would say that the media largely doesn't represent the average fan. And I don't even know how we fix that problem. Do we go independent like a Luke Thomas? Oftentimes very pretentious, but he knows what he's talking about, right? So it's fun as long as you like being talked down to. Oh shit, you don't like that? Well, we have other options, I guess. If you don't like shitty tactics or being belittled, there's no journalists with real personality. I'm gonna go and name some people here, and it's not their job to be personalities. They're more pure journalists, and I can respect that. Big Marcel on Twitter, none of his personal biases come through in any of his reporting. Very reputable. I love the guy. James Lynch gives everybody a fair shake of the stick. Brett Okamoto is okay, but he's kind of bought and paid for by ESPN. He's very corporate. I covered that in a video a couple weeks back. You should really check that out if you haven't already. He's generally pretty good, but I feel like his potential's wasted there. John Morgan is given access to Ali Abdelaziz's dominance MMA fighters. In return, he doesn't badmouth Ali at all. That's another slightly smaller issue with MMA journalism. Lots of managers have a media member of choice and keep their fighters on a pretty short leash. Lynch and Helwani at different times have been banned from talking to the dominance MMA guys, which is like an 8th, a 7th, maybe even a 6th of the roster. It's a large chunk, so that's not great. Those are the only two I'm familiar with, but I'm sure he's barred other journalists as well. Again, there is a wide gap between softball questions and instigating. But real journalism isn't safe. Real journalism ruffles some feathers, and that's bad for business. I can't even say that, like, there's something to look forward to in the future. The future is not bright. The gimmicky in-person reporters have kind of all gone away. You know, Nina Drama was supposed to be the future of journalism. Cheap, surface-level questions. But it's a woman this time. But people can tell that she didn't really earn it. You know, she wasn't in the trenches grinding away for years, getting a journalism degree. Long hours, long days. She has a degree in poetry. Look it up. She did modeling for a decade, you know? Her first gig was at the UFC Awards. Her third interview was John Jones. She's just there to grift baby grift and peddle as much power slap nonsense as humanly possible. The Schmoes viewership has been steadily decreasing. It's entertaining but inauthentic, you know? It's not supposed to be authentic. But what have we learned from a Schmo interview? I personally am not a journalist. People have called me a journalist in the past. That's unwarranted. I don't break news. I don't get a scoop. I have occasionally aggregated information about specific topics and put them together in an entertaining package, but I don't have sources or a bibliography or any of that. It's all second and third hand information, right? Sometimes there's differences between the journalists that show up at press conferences and ones that do like reporting and interviews. Everybody has their own kind of thing that they do, but the ones at the press conference just are not good. You have free reign to ask any question you want to one of the greatest fighters in the world, and you just ask how they feel fighting in blank. Hey Khalil, how do you feel fighting in Baku? I feel unsafe. You get what I mean. Same questions every single press conference. So how do we fix it? New blood seems like a good place to start. All the other journalists have been here grinding away for 10 to 15 years. You know, not something like Nina, where they get there without hassle, but we need some fresh faces. We can't just have one either. We need a wide variety of honest journalists, ranging from the pure journalists with a touch of personality to the more boisterous, partial journalists in the vein of an Ariel Helwani, but who are also honest about what they're doing and don't sell fool's gold, who are knowledgeable, interesting, and fighters should want to talk to them. Most fighters hate media day. It's boring, it's repetitive, they have better things to do. They're mid-weight cut. So they walk out on that stage and you ask him about the weight cut and how it's going, and they're probably going to come at you from a place of annoyance. Because not only have other media members asked him that, his team has been asking him that, UFC officials have been checking his weight, like everybody's asking, what's your weight? So they get out there, give him something new to think about, help them pass the time. Fighters know that they have to do media as a part of their contract and to grow their following, and hopefully that translates to having those bigger paychecks and growing their star and this and that. But they're also fearful of getting misquoted, or they're uncomfortable with some of the questions. So your job as a media member should be to make yourself as accessible and as easy to talk to as possible. Have an open line of communication and make it very clear that you're not going to misrepresent him. The way that Nina Drama conducts her interviews isn't that bad. Having a chill, one-on-one conversation is a very good method to get answers out of people. Okay, like a podcast, but you cut down the interview, you make it real intimate. But as fans, we need relevant questions, something that we can, going back to the opening, build a narrative off of. DDP has faced mostly strikers in the UFC, barring Whitaker, and Derek Brunson. Ask him about what specific positions he sees himself having an advantage in over Khamzat Chimaev. Then also mix in some goofy questions about Khamzat having the sniffles, At least it has some sort of meaning. But no, Nina, I swear to God, this is going to happen. We'll ask DDP if he's had a Chicago-style deep dish pizza. Whether you like it or not, that's what's in the cards, buddy. You get Chicago references. Maybe at most she asks him about kissing his coach or whatever, and maybe she brings up sniffles, but she will not ask him about grappling. She will not ask him about striking other than saying, oh, your style's really goofy. You know what's really goofy? Kissing other men, that's about it. That's about all that you're going to get from Nina Drama. I just want a journalist or an MMA media member to really look forward to, someone who I can trust. I want someone to give me information at a decent rate. I want them to be a little bit entertaining. They don't have to be like a guru or a Lucas Tracy, but just something. And just let me know that you're independent and you're not being bought off by these people, and just ask good questions. That's all it takes, is asking some good questions that I can work with as a person who likes the narrative side of MMA. Or if you're going to ask him a technique question, that's fine too. Or ask him a violence question, or ask him a national pride, or what did I say at the start? Collective pride question. Just ask him something that someone is going to hear and be like, whoa, that's crazy, Nobody's going to hear DDP's thoughts on a fucking kangaroo and think, oh wow, well that's good to know. That doesn't advance our knowledge. It entertains us a little bit, but it's kind of just surface level. So I want something to really sink my teeth into, and until we get that, journalism is canceled. Let me know your thoughts on MMA journalism or how you'd fix it in the comment section below. Like, comment, and subscribe for more MMA content. Shout out to Shauna, Proletarian Gothic, and Lambslayer for being vampiric enjoyers. You too can get your name read out at the ends of videos by becoming a member today. Thank you all so much for watching. Maybe the real MMA journalism was the friends we made along the way. And have a good time.